If that big backfire effect, the popular idea that correcting someone makes their beliefs stronger, if that's actually rare in the lab, what are people truly doing, psychologically, when they so loudly defend a false belief against evidence? Welcome to the Future of Thought, where we dig into these really complex ideas about psychology and belief and try to distill them into something useful.
Today we are wrestling with a huge one, a concept that has, I think, really dominated online debate for, the last decade? The idea that facts don't work. That sometimes when you challenge someone's belief with good evidence, they dig in even harder. We're talking about the backfire effect.
And that idea has almost become a self-fulfilling prophecy, hasn't it? It confirms our deepest cynicism about talking to each other today.
It does.
It suggests people are fundamentally irrational. And so, why even bother having a difficult conversation? But the sources we've looked at for this, they suggest the science has really shifted.
We're here to challenge that cynicism. The popular story that correcting someone just makes their belief stronger is, it seems it's often based on a real misunderstanding of the psychology at play.
Right.
Modern, large-scale studies are telling a much more hopeful story about our capacity for change.
So our mission today is to unpack that research, to look at why the strong version of the backfire effect is actually pretty rare, and why belief change is much more common than we give it credit for. We want to arm you with the knowledge to see the difference between someone genuinely hardening their conviction and someone just putting up a public shield. So here's the question we want to answer today. If that big backfire effect, the popular idea that correcting someone makes their beliefs stronger, if that's actually rare in the lab, what are people truly doing, psychologically, when they so loudly defend a false belief against evidence?
And, as always, we've put together a Substack article with all the original research links. That includes the papers on the replication failures we're about to discuss. The link is in the description right below this audio.
Okay, so let's start with the popular claim. The backfire effect, as we all first heard about it, was this idea that showing someone contradictory evidence makes them generate counter-arguments.
Right.
Which then reinforces their original false belief. It's an intuitive idea. It feels so true because we've all seen it online.
That intuition is why it spreads so fast.
Yeah.
The initial studies from researchers like Nyhan and Reifler they were striking. They seemed to prove that giving factual corrections to people with strong political identities was not just useless, but actually counterproductive.
It gave us all an excuse to just abandon civil debate.
It did. But that finding, as powerful as it seemed at the time, it ran into a bit of a wall when other labs tried to see if they could get the same results.
A big wall, from what I've read.
A very big wall. Across, a decade of follow-up studies and these massive meta-analyses designed to test this specific thing, that strong, aggressive version of backfire. The idea that people become more certain in the face of facts. It proved, as one researcher put it, stubbornly elusive.
Stubbornly elusive. That suggests it isn't just a methodological error, but maybe an error in how we were interpreting human psychology in the first place. So what is the current consensus now?
The scientific consensus today is that strong backfire effects can happen. They're not a total myth, but they are absolutely not the default.
Not the default.
Not at all. The vast majority of people, when they're exposed to factual corrections, they adjust their beliefs, at least a little, in the direction of the evidence. It might not be some dramatic, instantaneous flip, but softening, updating. That's the norm. The cynical view just doesn't hold up in the lab anymore.
So if people are updating more often than we think, we have to pivot our focus. If we see someone getting angry or loud or defensive, that isn't necessarily proof that their belief is getting stronger internally.
No.
So we need to understand the difference between that external defensiveness and an internal conviction. Why is that distinction so important?
It's everything, because it dictates our approach. If we assume defensiveness means hardening, we just disengage, we walk away, we reinforce the whole idea that change is impossible.
Right.
But if we see defensiveness as a protective posture, it tells us something different. It tells us that maybe our approach, not just the facts, is the point of failure.
If you find this way of thinking about conversations is helpful, it would be a huge help to us if you just, take a second to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for the future of thought. It just helps make sure you don't miss our next one.
So let's get to the core of that defensiveness, which really answers that question you posed at the start.
Okay.
Later analysis suggested the initial backfire studies were widely misinterpreted. They focused way too much on the cognitive side of things, and they missed the social element. The participants who got resistant, They weren't feeling intellectually threatened. It wasn't about their logic. They were feeling socially threatened.
That reframes the whole interaction. So the doubling down we see, especially in a public setting, is often it's performative.
Performative is a great word for it.
It's this loud display of loyalty. If I loudly reject your fact, I might not be confirming my own conviction so much as I'm confirming my allegiance to my group. It's a social signal.
This is a really key insight that comes from people in the field. You know, experienced facilitators in conflict mediation or in structured dialogues, they often report that people sound the most offensive. They give the loudest, quickest rebuttal right before they start to revise their beliefs internally.
So the loud no is a way of buying time.
It's buying time to reconcile the new information with their identity, but without looking vulnerable to someone they see as being in an outgroup.
So the main finding here is that this immediate protective posture isn't a stone wall of strength and belief. It's a temporary shield. It's put up to protect their identity while the mind quietly digests this new, potentially threatening information. That's the real answer.
And because researchers have spotted this pattern, they've also been able to pinpoint the specific conditions where backfire does reliably show up. And it's almost always a failure of the dialogue, not a failure of the facts.
Okay, so what are those conditions?
Backfire is most likely when 1, a person's identity feels threatened, 2, their autonomy feels restricted, 3, the correction feels humiliating or public, 4, the messenger is seen as an outgroup antagonist, and 5, the issue has deep moral weight tied to their self-concept.
And if you just look at that list, it's so clear. These triggers have almost nothing to do with the factual content or the quality of the evidence. It's all about the other person's sense of dignity. You can have the best facts in the world, but if you deliver them in a way that implies the person is stupid or immoral, you trigger that shield.
Right. When you challenge the belief in the person at the same time, you're not activating a cognitive defense. You're activating a powerful primal defense against social exclusion.
And understanding that helps us move past the backfire myth and look at 3 better validated mechanisms that explain why conversations can feel so stuck.
These are really the engines of conversational friction. So mechanism number 1 is reactance.
Reactance, that's that reflexive pushback, right? That knee-jerk rebellion you feel when you perceive your freedom is being restricted.
Yes. If a correction feels too pushy or aggressive, or it tries to force you to agree, reactance kicks in specifically to reassert your personal autonomy.
To say, don't tell me what to think.
Could you give an example of how that works in a conversation, just to make it concrete for everyone?
Sure. Think about unsolicited health advice. Let's say a friend knows deep down they probably should cut back on coffee. But if you confront them in front of other people and say very aggressively, you must stop drinking 3 cups a day, the research is clear. That pushy restriction on their autonomy triggers reactance.
And what happens?
They might just order a 4th cup on the spot. Not because they suddenly love caffeine more, but because they have to reassert, I control my own choices. The response is about the approach, the loss of freedom, not the science.
That really highlights why tone and pacing matter so much. Okay, so mechanism 2 is identity protective cognition. This is where a belief is directly tied to belonging to a group.
And what's so fascinating here is that the motivation isn't to find the truth, it's to protect the group. The internal question isn't, is this factually correct?
Yeah.
It's, if I accept this, does it invalidate my group's position? Does it threaten my status in that community?
To use a low-stakes example, think about sports fans. A person has spent years defining themselves as a devoted fan of a certain team, buying the merchandise, going to games, and you present solid evidence that the team cheated. The defense that comes up isn't really about the evidence. It's about protecting the self-concept that is all tangled up with that team. They defend the team to defend their own identity.
And the more central that group is to their life, the higher that cognitive wall goes. To admit the cheating would mean they have to rebuild a part of their identity, and that's hard work psychologically.
Okay, and mechanism number 3 is attitude polarization.
Attitude polarization is less about the false belief getting stronger and more about selectively managing information. When someone is challenged, they become these highly skilled evidence filters.
So what does that look like in practice?
They put way too much emphasis on any little piece of evidence that supports their view. And at the same time, they just ramp up their skepticism toward the source of the contradictory information.
So it's not that the false belief actually grows, but their internal filter gets stronger. They engage in motivated reasoning to make sure only confirming information gets through. And in doing that, They amplify the gap between themselves and the person they're talking to.
Yeah, they don't update their belief, they just update their criteria for what a trustworthy source is. And, spoiler, it only includes sources that already agree with them.
So if you connect these three, reactance is fighting for freedom, identity protective cognition is fighting for belonging, and attitude polarization is fighting for consistency.
You get a perfect roadmap for why conversations stall out. None of them mean that the person's belief is genuinely getting stronger, but they all create that powerful feeling that you're just stuck, even if that person is quietly thinking, maybe I should look into that later.
The shift in the research, from backfire is a law to defensiveness is a symptom, it gives us really clear practical guidelines. So the question becomes, how do we create the conditions where belief revision can happen?
The sources all point to structured dialogue methods as the model. And street epistemology, or SE, comes up again and again as a perfect case study. It's an approach that just intuitively neutralizes the exact triggers we just discussed.
It's remarkable how well SE aligns with the latest research on dignity and autonomy. The core of SE is built on being non-confrontational. It systematically avoids just dumping facts on someone.
Right. Instead of giving them facts, you focus entirely on the method they use to form their belief in the first place.
And by using language that constantly honors their autonomy phrases like, is it okay if we explore how you got to that conclusion? Or what might it take for you to change your mind? You're actively signaling that they are in control.
Which removes the main trigger for reactance.
Completely. And by focusing on the method, the reasoning, the evidence, and not the content of the belief itself, the conversation avoids an immediate identity challenge. It becomes a conversation about epistemology, not about their character or their group loyalty.
The slow pacing, the genuine curiosity, it's all designed to maintain psychological safety. It provides the space needed for an internal shift to happen without making the person feel like they have to lose face.
SE really acts as a real-world demonstration of how to create that safety in these high-stakes conversations. It teaches us that belief revision happens when you remove the sense of threat.
So the research delivers this really critical rule of thumb. The perception of true backfire happens when people feel unsafe or humiliated. Belief revision happens when people feel respected and autonomous.
And it's important to remember this method is about creating the right conditions for reflection. It is not about scoring a point in a debate. For listeners who want to explore this non-confrontational approach more, we'd recommend visiting navigatingbeliefs.com to take the free Street Epistemology course.
This data offers such a fundamentally hopeful challenge to all the cynicism out there. People do update their beliefs. They soften, they reflect. But they do it when they feel they have permission to. And often, the most important work happens internally, maybe hours or even days after the conversation is over.
I think we can summarize this entire deep dive with one powerful point from the source material. The backfire effect isn't a fundamental law of human psychology. It's a reliable symptom of threatened identity.
That says it all.
When we threaten dignity, people put on a protective performance. When we honor their autonomy, they can adopt a reflective posture.
The true challenge, then, it isn't about having the right facts. The challenge for all of us is creating the right psychological conditions for genuine reflection to actually occur.
And we want to hear from you. We have all seen this dynamic in action. What conversations have you had recently, personal or professional, where you saw that immediate, loud defensiveness that might have actually been masking a potential internal shift? Start a conversation about the future of thought in the comments section below.
Thank you for joining us for this vital exploration into the mechanics of belief change. We'll be back soon with more insights on the future of thought.